there will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. Thank you very much. Honorable members, can we get an indication as to whether there's anyone who wants to move a notice of a motion? Yeah.
Chair, on the multi-party WIPS forum, there was a decision that motions will be removed for today. Am I right? That's how I have it.
No, thank you very much. I'm sure that is helpful because it takes us to the next step. I'm reliably informed that the Chief Whip would like to say a few words.
Thanks very much, Chairperson, and also to Honorable Labuskacher for indicating the agreement of the WIP Forum on this matter of motions. Chair, I want to move that items 2, 3, 4, as appear on the order paper, and 5, on the consideration of reports of Select Committee on Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, stand deferred for another session.
There we are. Thank you very much. And that, honorable members, takes us to the Secretary. Yeah. The Chief Whip has spoken, and as I understand it, there's no objection. Yes. Thank you very much. Can the Secretary please read the first order?
Consideration of report of Select Committee on Finance, 2020 Fiscal Framework and Revenue Proposals.
First order. Can you please now, at this point, call on Honorable Karim to come forward?
Chairperson, Minister, comrades and colleagues. Chairperson, I didn't know I'll have to ask you to do this, but I'd be very grateful if you would protect me against my provincial whip. She's not supposed to heckle her own comrade, but there she is. All right, Budget 2020, as we know, colleagues and comrades, is a very bleak budget in a very bleak global and domestic environment. And even if the budget is not a traditional budget of austerity, it's a very austere budget. It's not as if the minister wants it. And even if the smallest party in this country, let's say, I don't know who it is, Azapo, whoever, were to produce a minister of finance, they will have to confront the very same challenges the current minister and government does. And there's no easy way out. And never before, it seems to me, have we needed to work together. And the coronavirus, in a curious way, as bad as it is for our country and the world as a whole, hopefully will impel us, despite all our differences, ideological, political, and other, to work together. And so far, it seems all parties are working together in this House and beyond, civil society too, and labor and business and all of us, on tackling the coronavirus. So, not that there's anything good about it, but who knows? Maybe, just maybe, one positive thing that might emerge is that we work together for once, since the first 5 years of our democracy, in the national interest, whatever our differences are, and of course there are many. Now, obviously, I'm going to just give a quick overview of the recommendations in our report. Obviously, I will not read the report out. It's for there in the ATC for those of you who care to read it. But I'll pick up on some themes and give it the political inflection that I think is appropriate coming from the party I do. Now, for what it's worth, the OECD says that global growth is expected to fall to 2.4% in 2020. But to some extent, it's done some assessment. The Minister and the National Treasury might know more. In fact, they will know more. I just looked very quickly just before I came here on the internet and drew on that. And it seems that they believe that the coronavirus will contribute to China's growth outlook being substantially reduced to 4.9%. Last year, for what it's worth, it was 6.9%. Now, this will actually mean that exporters to China, it's noted, are likely to see their exports decline, both due to the weakening demand from China and the decline, obviously, in key commodity prices. The most exposed are obviously mining economies, and that means us. In South Africa, moreover, it is argued by the OECD, if I've got this right, the manufacturing sector will also be affected, particularly in respect of metals, which has, of course, the consequence that you need lower demand for minerals and mineral inputs from South Africa. And importers, of course, might be faced with supply constraints and an associated increase in inflation. And tourism, this affects us very, very seriously, will be negatively affected. Now, obviously, the committee is very concerned about the contraction of the growth rates in the last 2 quarters. It comes on the heels of a very low growth rate forecast for 2019, 2020, and then 2020, 2021. And over the 3 years, we're expecting at most to get to 1.6%. Now, it's interesting when the Reserve Bank briefed us in February this year, they stated that South Africa's projected growth is disconnected, to use their words, unusual to use their words, as there usually is a much closer correlation of the country's growth to the global and sub-Saharan growth averages. We are far removed from that even before the virus afflicted us. So now, as usual, all the experts, not just the private sector, not just the rating agencies, say that our growth forecasts are linked partly to the global economy, but significantly to our failure to effect structural reforms. And we go on and on, both the National Treasury and ourselves as Parliament, structural reforms, structural reforms. It's like a mantra. For years we've been saying it. Some of the issues that are currently on the agenda have been there for many, many years. Chairperson, I think it's fine, as we've said repeatedly, to critique the executive. That's our job. But the truth of the matter is, if we are more effective and efficient in our oversight role, as required by the Constitution, and many, many pieces of legislation that the majority party processed through, sometimes with the cooperation of the opposition parties in this Parliament, if we did all the things we are required to do, colleagues, then the prospects of growth, job creation, tackling unemployment more efficiently will be so much easier. In my view, and the view, I think, of the majority in our committee, we are complicit as the Parliament because we do not implement our role effectively and efficiently. And you know, the thing is that we need to do that more than ever, Chairperson. More than ever, we need to do that. And as I started by saying, we need to work together. Let's start in the Finance Committee, working more efficiently and effectively together. And hopefully, other committees will also, in both houses of Parliament, actually do what we are required to do. So the committee is obviously concerned about the low growth leading to a 63.3 billion downward revision to estimates of tax revenue in 2019-20 when compared to the forecast in the 2019 budget. The committee expresses its concern that this may further deteriorate given the economic recession announced by Stats South Africa recently, and of course the coronavirus as just mentioned. Now, we welcome the fact, Minister, that the VAT increase has not come about for this year, but your officials said it may well happen next year or the year after. Now, we think that this is the last measure, And moreover, the committees on both sides of the House feel that, on both houses rather, that we would like not a piecemeal approach to additional revenue. Obviously, you can't, as a national treasury, say from the outset, well ahead of time, well before a budget, you know, the MTBPS provides a framework anyway for some degree of predictability, exactly what you're going to do on tax increases. But a broader policy discussion is what we're urging. And we note, for example, that you are suggesting Inspector General. Now, let me read to you what the committee feels. The committee notes the proposal, it says no more than that, to introduce an Inspector General to oversee SARS. However, the committees of finance would like to be briefed jointly in the next quarter on the overall changes being proposed to SARS, including those that emerge from the recommendations of the Nugent Commission, so that we have an overall sense of the restructuring of SARS rather than the current piecemeal approach of Treasury. And the budget review of the Standing Committee on Finance in October last year said the committee believes that there is a need for a discussion and clarity on the recommendations of the Nugent Commission and the Davis Tax Committee, as the former recommended the appointment of an Inspector General, and the latter, the establishment of a governance or advisory board. The committee expects to be briefed, it's noted in that report, by National Treasury and SARS on the CATS Commission, Davis Tax Committee, and the Nugent Commission on the administration of SARS, once a discussion document on these issues has been finalized. And we want more to be done on the digital economy, but I want to draw your attention to what the Parliamentary Budget Office independently, Minister, I didn't solicit it as an SACP member. This is what they say, right? It's sort of an argument that the National Treasury also needs to be more open-minded about the prospects of what's possible, not have a sort of sense of a monopoly of wisdom. Not that I'm saying it does, but that's a feeling sometimes one gets. Here it is. The PBO argued that the macroeconomic approach in the 2020 budget was too narrowly focused on the supply-side interventions in the economy. It said that the level of demand has been a serious constraint on economic growth. Fiscal consolidation, it said, has negatively affected aggregate demand on GDP growth. It is submitted that the speed at which the economy can grow depended largely on improving aggregate demand. It added, that's a PBO, that reducing the cost of doing business will be effective only if business have adequate demand for their products. And you can read that, it's there. But I want to end on this note, colleagues, that for all the difficulties we have, it's not all doom and gloom. We can get out of where we are. If we didn't think so, we wouldn't be in this parliament. We have an obligation to the people out there who elected us to do what we have to do to turn this economy around, to create jobs, and to ensure a reduction of inequality. This country is too strong, too powerful, has an enormous history that shows our considerable potential. And we should never forget that we triumphed over apartheid in a relatively peaceful, unprecedented transition. Desmond Tutu didn't fall from the skies. Madiba didn't fall from the skies. Even F.W. de Klerk and Nkosi Buthelezi and Constant Viljoen didn't fall from the skies. In all their ways, they contributed to where we are. But we owe it most of all to our people right now to work together and deliver, which is not to say we're going to succumb to what Treasury and the Executive says, but on the other hand, as Parliament, we need to work with them where it's necessary and exercise criticism and effective oversight of them when it's necessary. And it's towards that end that this report ultimately is pitched. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Honorable members, that will conclude the debate. I shall now put the question. The question is that the report be adopted. And in accordance with Rule 71, I shall first allow provinces the opportunity to make their declarations of vote if they so wish. The maximum time allowed for declaration is 3 minutes. Any province wishing to make a declaration, Western Cape?
Honourable Chairperson, the Western Cape supports the report as an accurate record After discussions held, we do, however, wish to place on record that we do not support the fiscal framework itself, due in main to the unsustainable and escalating debt levels. The fiscal framework shows no commitment to addressing the budget deficit in the medium term, and this poses a massive risk to South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other provincial declaration? Yes.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. The African National Congress support the report.
No, just to remind members, these are provincial declarations, not party declarations. Any other provincial declaration? None. We shall now, honorable members, proceed to manual voting on the question, and I shall do so in alphabetical order per province. Call you province by province. Eastern Cape,
Eastern Cape, I report.
Eastern Cape, class, the Free State.
Free State supports the report.
Free State supports the report. Gauteng.
Gauteng supports the report.
Gauteng supports the report. KwaZulu-Natal.
KwaZulu-Natal iyayeseka
KwaZulu-Natal iyayeseka. Limpopo.
Limpopo iyamukela report.
Limpopo iyamukela report. Mpumalanga.
Mpumalanga iyayisupport report.
Mpumalanga iyayisupport the report. Northern Cape.
Northern Cape supports the report, Chair.
Northern Cape supports the report. Northwest.
Stem some the report.
Northwest stem some. Western Cape.
The Western Cape supports the report.
Western Cape supports the report. The overwhelming majority of provinces support the report. Therefore, the report is adopted in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. Thank you very much. We'll now proceed to the reading by the Secretary of the sixth order of the day.
Of report of Select Committee on Security and Justice. Oversight visit to Limpopo Province, dated 3 December 2019.
Thank you very much. We shall therefore ask Honorable S. Sheikh to come forward.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, Deputy Chairperson, and honorable members of this August House. Chairperson, the Select Committee on Security and Justice conducted a joint oversight visit to Limpopo Province from the 22nd to the 25th of October 2019 to Thohoyandou Police Station, the Beitbridge Port of Entry, and the Limpopo High Court. The purpose of the visit to the Thohoyandou Police Station was to oversee safety operations to reduce crime and crime statistics with a focus on sexual offenses. In terms of crime stats, Thohoyandou was the third out of the 10 worst policing precincts in the country in respect of the number of sexual offenses reported. Of particular concern to the committee was that out of the 297 sexual offenses reported in 2018-2019, 268 were rape cases. Some of the key risk challenges identified were university accommodation, service delivery protests, influx of undocumented foreign nationals, the lack of street lights, unnamed streets, and the low morale among staff members. Furthermore, the Family Violence Child Protection Services and the Sexual Offences Unit officers reported that they have insufficient facilities, no psychologists, and a lack of DNA results, which causes a high number of cases being withdrawn. Chairperson, the committee noted that the police station was understaffed and had a limited number of police vehicles, with police vehicles being in repairs for very long periods of time. Furthermore, statements for sexual offences were taken privately by making use of a facility outside of the Tutuzela Care Centre. Chairperson, the committee thus recommends that the South African Police Services engage with the Department of Home Affairs in dealing with matters of undocumented foreign nationals being detained for long periods of time. The South African Police Service considers prioritizing the resources and capacitation in light of the fact that in 2022, more officers would retire. The South African Police Services consider finalizing a contract with the service provider for the repairs of vehicles, and the construction of an additional police station should be fast-tracked to fully provide policing services to the Thohoyandou community. In terms of the visit to the Beitbridge port of entry, the aim was to conduct an inspection, but also to understand the working relationships between the Department of Home Affairs, the South African Police Services, the Department of Defense, and the South African Revenue Services. This in light of the fact that the committee at the time was also in the process of considering the Border Management Authority bill. Chairperson, the committee was particularly concerned about reports of corruption and infrastructural challenges at the border post, and noted the following during the visit: that there were limited human resources at the Beitbridge port of entry, and almost no new appointments were made in the past 5 years. A taxi rank and small business activities were situated very close to the port of entry. The fencing and aging infrastructure required urgent attention. The committee made the following recommendations: that there is a need to increase the number of Defence Force members at the ports of entry so that they are able to perform their respective responsibilities adequately. The Department of Home Affairs should engage Department of Public Works regarding urgent installations of robots and boom gates at the port of entry to curb the forceful entry of vehicles. The Department of Home Affairs should engage with key stakeholders in government in order to find a lasting solution to address the location of the taxi rank and the small businesses at the port of entry. In addition, more staff are required at the port of entry to ensure adequate border law enforcement. Chairperson, the committee met with the Department of Justice and the National Prosecuting Authority at the new Limpopo High Court to conduct an inspection of the High Court and to understand the challenges and the working relationship between the different departments. The Limpopo Division of the High Court was established in Polokwane on the 25th of January 2016. The Department of Justice experienced various challenges with service providers during the construction of the court, and the cost of the court had escalated to over 1.1 billion. The department appointed the Special Investigating Unit to investigate the matter. Chairperson, the NPA reported that the High Court was performing satisfactorily with 441 cases finalized since 2016, while 39 cases were backlog cases and the outstanding roll was at 211. A key observation noted by the committee was that even though the Polokwane High Court was a new court and had been described as a state-of-the-art facility, the court was experiencing infrastructural challenges. The committee further keenly awaits the outcome of the Special Investigation Unit investigations. Chairperson, the committee recommendations include that the NPA should consider employing more staff members, that the Department of Justice should engage the municipalities in areas to address water challenges at courts as these cause delays, that mechanisms should be sought to curb the postponement of cases, and that the Department of Justice should engage with the South African Police Services in order to develop a strategy to ensure that the safety concerns are adequately addressed in courts, and that there are appropriate interpretation services be made available to foreign nationals to avoid the postponement of such cases. Chairperson, the Select Committee on Security and Justice recommends that the National Council of Provinces adopt the report. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Shaik. We note as we move forward that this concludes the debate, and I shall now put the question. The question is that the report be adopted. But in accordance with Rule 71, I shall now first allow provinces the opportunity to make their declaration of their vote, if they so wish, but to warn members that there's the maximum time allocated for declarations is 3 minutes. Any province wishing to make a declaration? Please indicate. None. We shall now proceed to the manual voting on the question, and we shall do so alphabetically. I now call on the Eastern Cape to indicate.
Eastern Cape Council report.
Eastern Cape supports the report. Free State.
Free State support the report.
Free State supports the report. Gauteng.
Gauteng supports the report.
Gauteng supports the report. KwaZulu-Natal.
KwaZulu-Natal ayeseka report.
KwaZulu-Natal ayeseka report. Limpopo.
Limpopo support the report.
Limpopo support the report. Mpumalanga.
Mpumalanga supports the report.
Mpumalanga supports the report. Northern Cape.
Umhlakoloni uyavumelana ne-report.
Umhlakoloni uyavumelana ne-report. Northwest.
Northwest support the report.
Northwest supports the report. Western Cape.
Cape supports the report.
Western Cape supports the report. As we have seen, the majority of provinces voted in favor. I therefore declare the report adopted in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. Thank you very much. We will now proceed, perhaps just to mention and to note that the Minister of Finance was here, has moved out briefly. Khai seems to have replaced him. Honorable Khai. Thank you very much. Honorable members will now move on to the debate on responding to the urgency to combat the reality of climate change. I'll call upon the first speaker.
Point of order.
Unless there's something really, really very important, a point of order. Let's hear you.
It's a point of order and it's very important, Chair.
Okay, let's hear you. Yeah, the question of translations remains a problem. Oh, it's cold. It's cold, okay. I'll polish my tongue next time. I'll polish my tongue. It's because you've raised this point so many times I thought it was obvious. Okay. I'll ask the table to look at the problem. Please look at the problem. But as we do that, let's call on Honorable Sila Buskakne to come forward. Honorable Labuskakne. No, there's supposed to be a debate on climate change.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Okay. So it's not, there will be a debate.
Yes. Please proceed.
Honourable Chairperson, honourable members, fellow South Africans, sometimes they stand in the searing heat of the summer sun. Sometimes they bear the brutal icy winter wind. holding banners, gripping placards, rising them as high as the skies can allow, doing everything in their power for the world to hear their voice. Their message stands in unison, and it is clear to the country's leaders: act now. They are the activists, the change makers, the citizens of our country, the future of the world. They want solutions, they want action, and it is about time we made things happen. They are the youth of our country, they are the youth of the world. They are not protesting, they are not asking, they are fighting against their future being cancelled. It is time to get real about climate change. It is time to face the truth. What are those truths? The truth is simple, in simple layman's language, is that we are experiencing global warming. The Earth's temperature is rising due to the emissions of greenhouse gases, with various negative and devastating impacts on the environment and climate of the world as we got to know it. Climate change implies rising temperatures, rising sea level, droughts, floods, fires, health risks, natural disasters, impacts on food security, agriculture and poverty, just to name a few. South Africa has a few dire challenges: poverty, inequality, unemployment, limited economic growth, and economic recession, as well as a lack of investment interest. On top of this, we are also experiencing some of the impacts of climate change, such as droughts, flooding, fires, and compromised ecological systems. However, we as the people living on this earth has a responsibility to address global warming and the consequent climate change's impacts. We do not have a choice to do nothing. We must manage our risks through mitigation and adaptation via responsible and innovative transition processes. We all know that the main driver of the world's effort to address global warming and climate change is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We all know about the COPs. Focus has been on the importance of a balance between climate finance for mitigation, which is the reduction of human emissions of greenhouse gases, and adaptation to change society's resilience to climate change. The Paris Agreement was signed by 195 countries. South Africa was one of them. As a signatory to the Paris Agreement, South Africa, for example, has 6 national determined contributions to reduce greenhouse emissions and adapt to impacts of climate change. As part of the National Climate Change Mitigation System, the Department of Environmental Affairs has developed sector emission targets or sets, regulations on a variety of issues affecting the environment, and as such climate change has been promulgated, for example, the National Greenhouse Gas Emission Reporting Regulations. A carbon tax bill has been passed in 2019. Draft regulations on this bill has been published earlier this year. The further importance of the Paris Agreement is the acceptance of the need to increase adaptation support for parties most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. The then Department of Environmental Affairs gazetted the draft National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy on the 6th of May 2019 to enhance adaptation capacity, strengthen resilience, and reduce vulnerability. We need action by everyone. Climate change strategies, goals, and interventions should be streamlined, integrated into all government departments, spheres of government, corporations, businesses, NGOs, and civil society. We must change our behavior. It is too expensive not to move forward. We already pay climate tax if we consider just the financial costs of disasters such as flooding, fires, and drought. The Western Cape Climate Change Response Strategy, second biannual monitoring and evaluation report of 2017-18, indicates that South Africa's legislation and policy instruments for disaster risk reduction, which includes early warning systems, are one of the best in Africa, as it adopted a proactive rather than a reactive approach. The Disaster Management Act of 2002, as well as the National Disaster Management Framework, guide disaster reduction management implementation in South Africa. The Disaster Management Amendment Act of 2015 specifically refers to climate change adaptation, ecosystem-based adaptation, and community-based adaptation measures and investments required by all tiers of government. Greenhouse gases is the result of human development, and various sectors contribute to it to a greater or a lesser extent. We all know that burning of coal and consumption of fossil fuels, thus the energy generating sector, contributes massively to greenhouse gases in South Africa. The solution to reduce a remarkable percentage of greenhouse gases is to add renewable energy to our mix of energy sources. Experience from the first world countries such as Germany teaches us that the transmission process from fossil fuels to renewable energy is not simple and could impact on enough energy supply. In South Africa, we already have a problem with not enough energy supply, relying mainly on coal. The need for transition to include renewable energy now is clear to everyone, or should I say everyone, including the President of the country, who pronounces it from every possible platform. The crucial measure, however, is the action that needs to follow. Renewable energy does not only address the impact of climate change, but create new economic opportunities and jobs. The Global Risk Report by the World Economic Forum defined environmental risks among the top risks to the globe in terms of the impact of climate change. The latest report of the South African National Biodiversity Institute, which evaluates the progress and shortcomings in conservation and ecosystem management on both land and sea, indicated major pressures on habitat loss, changes to freshwater flow, pollution, invasive alien species, and overuse of some species. Minister Creasy herself said the most concerning issue of this report is the state of our freshwater ecosystems, rivers, wetlands, estuaries, and freshwater fish stock. We need to address the impact of climate change on our scarce water resources. South Africa is already experiencing water usage crises. Cape Town's Day Zero crisis was part of the devastating impact of one of the most severe droughts we ever had. We did not have a choice other than to move forward, adjust our behavior and water consumption, as well as research, innovate, integrate, and cooperate on all spheres of government, business, and civil society to prevent such a crisis in the future. A report of the Carbon Disclosure Project highlights a few concerns about specific industries in South Africa. One of the conundrums is the demand for water supply in the mining industry versus the demand for water supply to the surrounding communities. The cost of reuse and post-use water treatment technologies raises the overall production costs of mining and might jeopardize much-needed jobs. Our challenge is on how to protect our water catchment areas, our rivers, and the rest of our freshwater ecosystems to ensure that the next generation will have fresh water as a natural resource. But we have hope. Fortunately, some work has been done on various levels and by various role players, including all spheres of government, non-government organizations, corporations, and businesses. I'm going to share some examples of that hope that have worked in the Western Cape, and I know that there are other provinces that have initiatives tailored to their environmental needs. One of the critical aspects of the Western Cape climate change resilience strategy is that the implementation is the responsibility across the whole of the provincial government and all associated stakeholders. The key priorities must be mainstreamed directly into sector policies, strategies and plans. A focus area of the Western Cape is to create an enabling environment for economic growth through resource resilience that focuses on climate change resilience, energy security, water security, and waste management and waste economy. Some of the projects that are yielding success rates is a smart agri-plan, including the Fruit Look project, that supports farmers' ability to increase water efficiency without compromising production. The Berg River Improvement Plan is based on a water stewardship program that recognizes the river as a vital ecosystem that needs to be maintained for its value to the green economy. Removal of alien invasive species contributes to the increased availability of clean water. The Western Cape's Biodiversity Plan has a handbook to support decision makers. Chairperson, another big part of our hope is the youth of our country, who are taking real proactive action in doing what is in their power to fight the threat to our existence. In the gallery right now, we have 2 young climate change activists doing everything in their power to combat climate change. Zoe Prinsloo started her own eco-friendly distribution business called Save a Fishy in August 2018. You can give her a hand, please. In 2019, she was a delegate to the United Nations Youth Climate Summit. In addition to this, Zoe has been a speaker at the LCA Spark Talks in July 2019. The eco-friendly equivalent of TED Talks has led the regional Earth Day beach cleanups for Girls Guides for the past 3 years and was an attendee of the Eden Festival of Action in 2019, helping plant 5,000 trees. Also in the gallery, we have Akonda Tloyeni, who is a member. Akonda? A hand for Akonda, please. Who is a member of the Climate Change Working Group, which contributed a youth statement to the COP25 delegation last year. Apart from being a global peace chain ambassador, Akonda has served on panels at the Page Ministerial Conference, the European Union Climate Change Roundtable, and the European Union SA Climate Action Summit, and is a former WWF International Earth Hour Ambassador and a Bali Model United Nations delegate. I want all of us to look up there at these young South Africans. I want all of us to realize we are responsible for the state of the environment right now. We have a moral obligation as the older generations of our time to ensure there is still a world left for their generation. With just the achievements and work of Zoe and Akonda combined, they have done more than any of us here will probably do with the rest of our lives. But that is no excuse. No one has an excuse to take some sort of proactive measures to fight this reality and save the only planet we know and will ever know in this lifetime. Let's beat the past and build the future through addressing climate change in every way possible. I thank you.
Thank you very much. As we call on the Eastern Cape to come forward, let us welcome the Minister of Environmental Fisheries and Forestry. So welcome the Minister, and we call on the member to speak.
Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, honorable members of the NCOP, and the honored guest, I bring you revolutionary greetings from the people of the Eastern Cape, the home of legends. Thank you for inviting us to this important debate on responding to the urgency to combat the reality of climate change. This is an important debate for us in the Eastern Cape, given the impact the reality of climate change has in communities, particularly those that have inadequate infrastructure to respond to natural disasters. We are also one of the provinces that are dealing with a devastating drought situation as a result of climate change. As stated by the UN Secretary General, open quotes, science is telling us that the impacts of climate change are happening now and faster than we had predicted. This is becoming increasingly evident in our daily lives. We are therefore delighted to see the NCOP taking interest in debating this matter, and we hope that we will come to this sitting with a more coherent and coordinated approach to combat the impact of climate change. As the Eastern Cape government, we are committed to achieving the 1.5 degrees Celsius bound as the socially, economically, politically, and scientifically safe limit to global warming by the end of this century, and the net zero emissions target by 2050 as the global long-term climate objective for all. In the light of the above, the report by the 2019 Climate Action Summit directed countries to urgently accelerate work to define what this entails for the short-term 2020 and mid-term 2030 commitments that will be captured in the national determined contributions and ensure the alignment of strategies to meet those commitments. Honorable Chairperson, we must agree that the existing social order has not addressed the challenges faced by societies across the globe. We must agree that the urge for wealth accumulation and profit maximization driven by greed and at the expense of our environment is not sustainable and is the reason why we are still grappling with the problem of emissions that pollute our environment and lead to the devastating impacts of heavy rains, storms, and other related natural disasters. We must agree, honorable members, that we will continue to debate the reality of climate change and struggle to address it unless we work towards achieving a more just, equitable, and people-centered social order where production is according to need. We need to confront global leaders to ensure that the decisions they take are in the interest of many generations to come. We need to address the problem of big corporations that continue to destroy our environment to maximize profits at all costs, while a few continue to accumulate wealth through destructive productive activities on our environment. Our societies continue to accumulate problems such as natural disasters. Honorable members, during the State of the Province address, our Premier, the Honorable Lubabalo Oscar Mabuyane, acknowledged that our province is one of the most disaster-prone areas in the country, and that we witnessed in Raymond Mhlaba municipality was unfortunate, and that our government will continue to offer relief to distressed communities. We must, Honorable Chair, welcome the commitment by the Department of Environmental Affairs to ensure that there are adequate instruments to improve efficiency and effectiveness of environmental impact assessment system across the country. These will include development of environmental management framework, where certain areas are identified as critical development areas with increasing development pressures. We also welcome the department's commitment to initiate the development of regulations to legislate the creation of strategic environmental assessment and the development of a strategic environment management framework for energy applications, specifically renewable energy applications. Honorable Chairperson, our province agrees with the 2012 Rio +20 Earth Summit outcomes, which amongst others identified the green economy in the context of sustainable development and poverty eradication and the institutional framework for sustainable development as part of the strategies to achieving the efforts of climate change mitigation. We also agree with the 5 strategies objectives identified in the National Strategy for Sustainable Development and Action Plan, which are enhancing system for integrated planning and implementation, sustaining our ecosystem and using natural resources efficiently towards a green economy, building sustainable communities, responding effectively to climate change through various interrelated and enabling interventions that promote sustainable development. We must invest in infrastructure development, especially in areas in the country that were largely affected by apartheid spatial patterns of development, such as Eastern Cape, which is largely a rural province, with a significant population living in remote rural areas. We therefore welcome and support the establishment of an infrastructure fund and improved investment in the municipal social infrastructure announced by the President as part of the Stimulus and Recovery Plan. Honorable members, as we know that the Minister for Mineral Resources and Energy, the Honorable Gwede Mantashe, has published the Integrated Resource Plan for implementation. Amongst other things, the plan stresses the importance of pursuing diversified energy mix and the need for new investments to be made in more efficient coal technologies to comply with climate and environmental requirements. As part of our commitment to use renewable technologies to diversify the electricity mix, produce distributed generation, and provide off-grid electricity, we will ensure that we support and make full use of the new wind projects that have been developed in the Eastern Cape. Lastly, as the province, we are committed to providing support to smallholder farmers by, amongst other, building their resilience to climate shocks and stresses. We want small-scale producers to adapt farming systems, livelihood, and landscapes to be more climate resilient. We will work to ensure that small-scale producers have expanded access to insurance, markets, finance, and productive safety nets, and the use of adaptation technologies and agroecological practices. As the home province of legends, we want to assure you that the Eastern Cape government will support efforts to mitigate the impact of climate change and ensure that we achieve the goal of having more sustainable and environmental-friendly development practices. Once again, thank you for inviting us to be part of this debate, and we hope that we can all work together to overcome the climate crisis and building a better Africa and a better world. I thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now call on the Democratic Alliance. DA Speaker.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, fellow South Africans. Climate across the world is changing, and the truth is, humans are responsible. The planet has slowly become warmer. More specifically, between the years 1880 and 2012, land and surface temperatures show an increase of approximately 1.1 degrees Celsius, and current temperatures are rising at about 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade. While most of us have acknowledged this fact, it seems we have no will, whether personal or political, to act and start fixing it. The biggest cause of climate change is carbon emissions. And as we continue to burn fossil fuels, the intensity of rainfalls will increase, leading to increased floods. The sea levels will rise, leading to flooding in coastal areas. Heat waves in tropical regions will claim more lives and make humans less productive. And ultimately, climate change is expected to push 100 million more people towards poverty. So, what does an ever-increasing warmer planet mean to all of us? According to the Paris Agreement that was signed in December 2015 by the United Nations and 195 governments across the world, South Africa being one of them, the aim is to reduce carbon emissions and in turn limit the warming of the Earth to 1.5 degrees Celsius. If this can be achieved, we will reduce the probability of droughts and risks related to water availability. In South Africa, and especially the Northern Cape, we have seen extreme cases of drought, so much so that it has now been declared a national emergency. As the Earth warms, it will affect our biodiversity and ecosystems, where it is estimated that 105,000 insects, plants, and vertebrates will become extinct in the future. Have you noticed that the bee population in your area has declined? Have you noticed that forest fires have increased, as we have seen in Australia, the Amazon, and here in South Africa? As the earth warms, climate-related risks to human life will become more severe. Risks to human health, livelihoods, food security, water supply, and economic growth will all increase. We face an existential crisis, and those who will be the most affected are the currently disadvantaged and current vulnerable populations on Earth. In our very unequal world, there are 7.5 billion people. 1.2 billion have little or no access to electricity. About 3 billion cook on open fires. 4 million die from indoor smoke inhalation, mostly women. And these are the very same people who will be more susceptible to climate-related poverty risks. Heat-related illnesses and mortality will increase, and this will affect mostly the elderly, children, women, and those with chronic diseases. Diseases like malaria will flourish in the heat. Food security is at risk because crops like maize, rice, and wheat will be smaller due to droughts and water shortages. We are currently experiencing the warmest temperature in more than 1100 years. However, only a few of us think it will affect us personally. Even worse, the media does not talk about it. People do not talk about it. And certainly, it is not sufficiently debated and discussed in schools. So how can we break the cycle and non-complacency? Simply by talking about it, to begin with. Let's all start talking from the heart and why it matters. We all have families, children, and loved ones. Let's take a moment and think about the activities you enjoy. Perhaps you enjoy hiking, swimming, walking in nature. God gave us responsibility over the earth, and so we need to think about our values, our daily activities, and why we should take care and care more about climate change. It can no longer be business as usual. So how do we begin the process of reversing global warming? By starting small. And as Honourable Lebuskagni said, we have a moral obligation towards our future generations. To begin with, let's recycle more. You can save 1,100 kilograms of carbon dioxide per year by recycling your household waste. Check your car tires. Keeping them properly inflated will improve petrol mileage and reduce carbon dioxide. Use less hot water by taking cooler showers. That will save 226 kilograms of carbon dioxide per year. Avoid products with a lot of packaging. You can save 544 kilograms of carbon dioxide if you reduce your waste by only 10%. Don't use plastic where possible. And you certainly don't need to drink that beverage with a straw. Plant 1 tree a month. It will absorb 1 ton of carbon dioxide over its lifetime. Turn off electronic devices when you are not using them. Try to cut down on meat consumption where possible. Don't waste food. Perhaps even grow your own. Consume less and waste less. It all starts with minimal effort, such as the suggestions I have just mentioned. But collectively, we can make an exponential difference. The challenges are profound, but they can certainly be solved. So more importantly, let's start climate conversations. Let's speak to our children, our family members, and loved ones. Let's respect the earth. Let's start a movement that cares for our planet and thus preserving it for our future generations. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Honourable Smith. Honourable Smith.
Honorable Chair, I greet everybody in this God-blessed house today. We all speak about climate change and what we need to do. But what do we do as individuals? We go into town shops, shop centers, and we look at images of dinosaurs that have left us behind millions of years ago. How long that it will be none of us going into shops to even look at the image of a dog. A simple dog that have died out because we as humans have no respect of the land that God has given us. And we are on the same road as these animals. We are put here to protect them. I just leave this so that we can think of what is going to happen if we do not do something dramatically towards climate change. Responding to the urgency to combat the reality of climate change is already a reality posing significant social, economic and environmental risks and challenges globally, but also poses a serious threat to the planet and people. Like many other developing countries, South Africa is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and has been identified as one of the countries that need to adopt greater urgency in tackling challenges posing by climate change, which is why South Africa has been tasked in ensuring the balance of economic growth and transformation with a sustainable use of environmental resources and responding to climate change. Responding to the urgency to combat the reality of climate change offers South Africa a clear pathway towards achieving a more prosperous, inclusive, equitable and secure future in which national priorities of eradicating poverty and reducing inequality will be addressed. Furthermore, my fellow South Africans, the South African National Climate Change Response White Paper and the National Development Plan are aimed at the combating and responding to climate change by the addressing and observing threats to the country's society, economy and environment, as well as to provide the basis for tracking South Africa's transition to a climate-resilient society and lower carbon economy. Responding to the urgency to combat the reality of climate change through the development and implementation of a framework for young people, policy input and decision-making on climate change could strengthen and improve youth participation and involvement in climate change-related issues. My friends, my Honourable Chair, water. And when I mention water, I ask myself, why is there so many farmers on this land of ours that do not clean out their dams, who are complaining about water shortage? Water is the primary medium through which the impacts of climate change are being felt in South Africa. The Free State, particularly Kwakwa, has experienced the worst drought in modern history. Increases in climate variability and climate extremes are impacting both water quality and availability through changes in rainfall patterns. With more intense storms, floods and droughts, changes in soil moisture, no control of runoff water, and the effect of increasing evaporation and changing temperatures on aquatic systems simultaneously. curbing climate change and responding to the unavoidable impacts of historic greenhouse gas emissions, both timelessly and continuously requires substantial and sustained production in greenhouse gas, which together with adaptation can limit climate change risks. Climate change action presents a clear path towards the shared aim of a healthier, more prosperous and a more secure future, our future. The wildlife fire situation was worsened significantly across South Africa. During the past several years, there have been major and catastrophic fires which have resulted in death, damage to infrastructure, and loss of property and assets. This has also impacted negatively on the natural environment and has come to an enormous direct and indirect social and economic cost to the country. The fynbos biome is defined by South Africa as the most fire vulnerable in the country and is even more prone to climate change-related disaster risks from wildland fire. The fynbos Fire Project is a global environmental facility funded initiative established in 2012. It is managed by UNDP and implemented by Landworks through the Department of Environmental Affairs in 4 rural communities within the fynbos biome. The project is aimed at developing sustainable interventions to radically reform the approach to managing wildfires and to implement strategies to reduce wildfire risks. Firewise community concepts aim to build resilience against destructive, unwanted wildfires and a focus on preventing damage to people's homes, livelihoods, and the landscape surrounding them. But I ask you, can we identify or ever read the destruction and the hardship that it leaves and the grooves that it leaves in the minds of the people it affected? What needs to be happen to address climate change? The current energy system must be overhauled. South Africa is officially committed to a 15% renewable energy target by 2020. But progress on the ground is painfully slow. The current financial crisis should provide an opportunity for all societies to shift to a low-carbon economy. The global slowdown is causing job losses and hardship to many. But equally, climate change means that it would be reckless to try to go back to fossil fuel-based development pathways that will in any way have to be abandoned soon. This is an opportunity to redevelop economies and create a new industrial revolution that develops and is powered by clean energy technologies. Doing so will create new jobs and a secure future for all. That we one day don't be like this. We calculate that the realistic program to promote renewables in electricity, biogas, solar heating, and biofuels could produce an extra 1.2 million jobs, direct and indirect, by 2020. That will probably have to change, or will we have to move forward? Clean energies also hold out much greater hope that communities that lack electricity from the central grid and who struggles to find fuel for cooking will see their energy needs met. However, getting the policy framework right is critical if we are to realize the potential with the right framework. Both the private sector and new community enterprises will take off and rapidly become a big part of the solution of South Africa's power shortage. The National Energy Regulator, NERSA, is to be congratulated for considering a feed-in tariff scheme to support renewable energy, a tried and tested
Time is
policy
up.
tool. I thank you, honourable members. God bless this House.
Honorable Ndongen.
Santasha. Honorable Chairperson, Deputy Chairperson, Minister, honorable members, guests in our gallery, Molweni Eastern Cape. Honorable Deputy Chairperson, more than half a century ago, we did not have climate change challenges we're experiencing today. The world has changed a lot since the end of the Second World War. The advent of industrialization has not only made social and economical life easier for us. For example, in the medical treatment of some of the deadline diseases, such Ebola, HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, and development of mining. But it has again sadly distributed to destructive climate change pattern. Indeed, climate change is a reality. The agents of the dealing and combating the reality of climate change is upon us all. There is no time to point fingers at each other and accuse one another of not doing anything to receive the harmful impact of climate change. As the African National Congress, we believe in collectivism, and action orientated towards climate change combat must be informed by our clear, conscious collective action. The stakes are the same for all of us. It is either collective environmental security or a collective extinction. Do we dare hesitate? No. Honorable Chairperson, Section 24 in our Bill of Rights in the Constitution deals with environmental and stipulates that everyone has the right to an environmental that is not harmful to the health or well-being, and to have the environmental protected for the benefit of the present and future generations through reasonable legislative measures that prevent pollution and ecological gradation, promote conservation and secure ecological sustainable development and use of natural resources while promoting justifiable economic and social development. Chairperson, there can be no doubt amongst us seated today in this House that this is a progressive provision in our Constitution. Chapter 2 of our Constitution deals with the human rights, and environmental rights are recognized as a human right. And I dare say that without Section 24, the right to life contained in Section 11 of the Constitution become inconceivable. The environmental provide all that is necessary to the maintenance and sustainability of the life on earth. In giving effect to Section 24, this Parliament has passed an able legislation, National Environmental Management Law Amendment Act, in order to ensure that right contained in the Constitution of the Republic. It is not with misplaced confidence that I stand here before the House and declare NEMA as a progressive legislation, not only in the country, but global. The Act promotes cooperative governance and future recognition in the importance of economic development. The United Nations, through the organ, the ECOSOC, holds that member states acknowledge that the rising global food and fuel prices, environmental degradation, and climate change requires an early concerted action. Chairperson, as a global, we are faced with a catch-22 situation. There is an interlink between the climate change environmental degradation, and sustainable livelihoods. Climate change is caused by environmental degradation caused through human activities in a quest of sustain their livelihoods. We are beginning to source for other sources of sustainable livelihoods without impacting negatively heavy on our environmental. This is mainly so because the world has come to a realization that we have been pursuing an unsustainable development path, and stride must be taken to find sustainable model of development that will guarantee us the future. Honorable Chairperson, in giving effect from Section 24B of the Constitution, this Parliament will receive the Climate Change Bill. As announced by the President in the address to the nation, the bill aims to build the country-effect climate change response and provide a just transition to a climate-resilient and lower carbon economic and society. Within a framework of the environmental sustainable development, South Africa just transitioned to the climate-resilient and lower carbon economic and society in clearly articulated in the white paper on national climate change response. Cognizance to the fact that our is to build a prosperous democratic society as that ANC. Our approach to climate change mitigation and adaptation response must help address the needs of the poor and the vulnerable sector of our society. The energy sector contributes about 8% towards total emission and electricity generation in the biggest emitter. The growth of our economy is dependent on electricity generation. Our economy is not doing well, and we all know how the country economy is dependent on reliable energy supply. The world energy sources are divided into three. We have a fossil fuel, nuclear fuel, and renewable. The reality is that our energy generation depends on fossil fuel from coal supply. In order to respond to the agents of combating climate change through mitigation, and President has announced in the SONA 2020, we will diversity energy capacity from renewable energy, natural gas, hydropower, battery storage, and coal. The ANC is working towards placing the economy on the qualitative different path, and this requires the stability and security of energy supply. As the organization, we support the integrated energy plan of government, which aims, among other, realize the efficient supply of sustainable energy to meet the demands of our growing population and help grow the economy. It has been reported by the government that until today, a total of 6,422 megawatts under the Renewable Energy Independent Power Produced program has been produced, with the 3,876 megawatts operation and made available to the grid. We know the positive spin of our renewable energy to reduce carbon emission into the atmosphere. As I close to my debate, Honorable Chairperson, as the Progress People Movement, the ANC leadership resolved that in the long run, South Africa must attain reliable, low-cost, and lower carbon energy supply to ensure the competitiveness of the economy and enable job creation and development new industries. We are speaking on green aviation fuel, green steel, green fertilizer, and chemicals. The ANC remains committed to just a fair world that protects the environment and promotes sustainable development. Drawing to our experience as a 108-year-old sustainable liberation movement, we will continue to work closely with international progressive organizations to ensure that we leave behind a legacy, a caring, protecting our environmental to the future generations. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kaile.
Honorable Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, honorable members, distinguished guests, I greet you all. As a point of entry to this important festival of ideas, of intellectual wrestling, if you like, we will begin by thanking the African National Congress and the people of South Africa, which has afforded us a space to contribute towards an exploring responses to the agency to combat the realities of climate change. Deputy Honorable Chairperson, it is almost 2 years since the ANC held its 54th National Conference, which was not only a platform to refresh the leadership mandate, but the conference also took clear resolutions aimed at realizing the fundamental goals of the ANC. Flowing from the above, Slalo, international work is one of the pillars of our struggle for progressive and radical change, mainly, hence the ANC also has an international character amongst others. This therefore means that the ANC is not immune from many serious challenges faced by the global village and community. Key amongst many global challenges is the unremitting spread of climate change, notwithstanding a variety of initiatives, including laws, conferences, treaties, regulations, and policies aimed at arresting climate change. The recent re-emergence of tension among the old international rivals, we know who we're talking about, is contributing towards ensuring that there is a lack of practical actions aimed at dealing with climate change. As they have moved out of the Paris Agreement, we know who we are talking about. Key amongst many global challenges is the remittent spread of climate change. Deputy Chairperson, the attainment of radical economic transformation is strongly dependent on the extent to which growth and development activities would advance principles of environmental sustainability. The depletion of natural resources in the province of KwaZulu-Natal and the impact associated with the decline in resource quality is of major concern, as it threatens the future well-being of the people and the economy. We are cognizant of the unfortunate reality that the poor will be the first to bear the brutal brunt of ukuguquka kwesimo sezulu. Indulge us, Chairperson, as we begin to debate by properly defining the term climate change. Most scholars agree that it refers to a change in global or regional climate patterns. This change is attributed largely to the increased level of atmospheric carbon dioxide produced by the use of fossil fuel. The dominant economic paradigm of neoliberal economic growth, obsessed with profit before people and environment, has largely contributed to climate change. Our government, through its progressive legislative framework, is steadfast in its resolve to replace this neoliberal economic paradigm, with one of its more resilient and not obsessed with profit before people and environment. This includes a shift to greater social justice and equity. In a world characterized by global natural resource depletion and growing social inequality, there is increasingly global agreements on the need for action plans and sustainable development, a concept that forms a cornerstone of a wide variety of global commitments. The South African government has committed itself to implementation of many of these global agreements, and since the 2002 Johannesburg World Summit on Sustainable Development has sought to take a global leadership role in this field. The ANC-led province of KwaZulu-Natal has laid a fundamental and set in place structures, as well as developed province-focused strategies document aimed towards the implementation of tangible responses projects on the ground. This has been achieved taking guidance from the 2011 National Climate Change Response Policy, as well as the recent National Adaptation Strategy. To date, KwaZulu-Natal has reviewed a sector climate change risk and vulnerable levels from the one determined in 2009. This work has been guided by national processes that have taken place since 2011. The Provincial Climate Change Adaptation Strategy and Implementation Plan, guided by the recent vulnerability assessment, therefore prioritize the most critical sectors, which is water resources, agriculture and food security, marine and coastal zones, biodiversity and ecosystem, human health, human settlement, transport and infrastructure, as well as disaster management. Similar assessment of risk and vulnerability propagated by climate change are also conducted at all 10 districts of the province, with the Metro have done so in a while. The outcomes of these assessments have identified a range of sectors that require prioritization at a district level. In agriculture and food security is promotion of climate-smart agriculture practices to be mainstreamed within the agricultural sector. In the human settlement, akekho ongakhohlwa sibuka kumabonakude abantu bekithi bedilikelwa imizi koMlazi, kwaMashu, Ntuzuma, Mpophomeni, Ntabamhlophe, koZakheni, abanye bemuka nezimoto ngalesi sikhathi kufika uzamcolo wesichotho ngesikhathi lina kakhulu izulu ngonyaka ophelile. Uhulumeni wethu kumele usebenze kanzima ukufundisa abantu bakithi ukuthi bangakhi eduze kwemifula nalapho kwaba khona amadamu ngoba uma efika uzamcolo ukhukhula kwasana. In a disaster risk reduction, the capacity of RDM's units needs to be strengthened at all levels. This means this measure is also a prerequisite for the mainstream of DRM measures into municipalities and line departments. The human health adaptation option suggests enhancing the capacity of the role players in the health sector. In light of the recent drought in KwaZulu-Natal, water resource need an integrated water resource management approach. This can strengthen water use efficiency and the utilization of diverse set of water source for different uses. The climate proofing of water infrastructure, as well as protection of inhabilitation of ecological infrastructure, should also become an adaptation priority of this sector. Marine and coastal zones need an integrated coastal management approach which focuses on disaster risk reduction, consideration of climate risks in zoning, the climate proofing of coastal infrastructure, as well as the protection of marine and coastal ecosystem. Lastly, the transport and public infrastructure to create more awareness on the effects that climate change will have on transport and public infrastructure amongst the key role players in the sector. On low emission, KwaZulu-Natal, being one of the largest economies in the country, which developed at a fast pace, it contributes remarkably to greenhouse gas emission, responsible for climate change. KZN is made up of a number of busiest economic hub zones found in Durban, Richards Bay, Pietermaritzburg, and Newcastle. These economies are heavily reliant on energy generated from the burning of non-renewable fossil fuel, which unfortunately release harmful greenhouse gases, and in particular carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which led to global climate change. Abantu base Durban South-based ko Lamontville, Wentworth, Jacobs, bakwazi kahle ukuguquguquka kwesimo sezulu nokunukubezeka komoya abawuphefumulayo. The province, therefore, is working to advance its efforts to monitor and reduce the level of GHG emissions, mainly focused on the energy, transport, and waste sector emissions. Currently, the province is working on the climate footprint project. The project was initiated last month and will start until 2021. It involves district municipalities. The main objectives of the project will be to quantify emissions from the sector identified through developing provincial specific greenhouse gas emission inventory. Through trade and investment, we are coordinating public and private sector investments in order to maximize growth impact to the total investment potential, taking into account the proven potential of investment in sustainable resource use, such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, building and local food production and market. The province has undertaken a number of initiatives aimed at promoting the integration of cleaner production and eco-efficiency measures with the business units. These include establishing an industrial waste minimization and promoting cleaner production initiatives in hospitality and tourism industry in the province. A shift to the
member. Your time is up.
I thank you.
Honorable Arnold.
Achtbare voorzitter, achtbare minister van Omgewingszaken, Bosbeheer en Visserye, achtbare leden van die Nasionale Raad van Provinsies, medeburgers van Suid-Afrika. Ons land Suid-Afrika is geseënd met natuurlike hulpbronne. Dit is ons almal se verantwoordelikheid om ons omgewing te beskerm. Die regering doen nie genoeg om die boodskap van omgewingsbewaring deur middel van volgehoue projekte en aksieplanne deur te voer nie. Die bewaring van ons planeet is in belang van die volgende generasie om te verseker dat hulle ook 'n omgewing kan geniet wat vry is van besoedeling. The effect of climate change is becoming more evident with frequent occurrences of drought, flooding, and diseases. In the last 2 decades or so, the country has experienced a number of adverse climate hazards. The most serious ones have been seasonal drought, intense rainfall, and flooding. Drought and floods have increased and intensified over the past 2 or 3 decades. Climate change have adversely impacted on food and water security, water quality, energy, sustainable livelihoods, and of most of the rural communities. The state must invest in the maintenance of our wetlands, most of which are critically endangered. As a country, we must invest in the protection of our biodiversity in a way that also improves social well-being. We must rethink a future we are going to bestow on our children free from carbon emissions, full of sustainable development ideas. Having said that, Honorable Deputy Chairperson, the African Climate Reality Project has done an assessment of all the political parties' 2019 manifesto against a set of 69 criteria focusing on environment and climate-friendly measures. The EFF has trumped all political parties in terms of its environment and climate change policies. The EFF has been labeled a leader, beating the ANC, the DA, GOOD, UDM, COPE, IFP, and the Freedom Front Plus. Given the effects that climate change will have on our environment, the economic freedom fighters in its 2019 election manifesto made the following commitments to the people of South Africa. Number 1, an EFF government will adopt a civil society-driven 1 million climate jobs initiative as a government program. Through this initiative, the EFF will create 1 million jobs aimed at transitioning from coal-based energy sources to renewable energy. We must find clean technologies for coal because we have enough coal, and if we continue to use it with the current technologies, it will cause more harm, and equally, we cannot afford not to use it. The EFF...
Sorry, Honorable Klute, what is it that you are raising on?
Thank you, Chairperson. I was just wondering whether the honourable member will take a question.
Deputy Chair, I don't take a question from Verwoerd. Deputy Chairperson, the EFF in its manifesto will progressively introduce a carbon tax as one additional tool in fighting for sustainable development, and we know that that carbon tax policy was introduced in June 2019. South Africa is one of the highest emitters of carbon dioxide. Carbon tax is designed to make polluters pay and to meet targets of reducing emissions of greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide. Businesses and industries must produce carbon dioxide through their operations, or businesses and industries that produce carbon dioxide through their operations must put people's health and the protection of environment first before profit. Too often, the solutions are profit-driven. And as the EFF, the current IPPs that is currently running, we do not object to renewables, but as the EFF, we object to the private ownership at the expense of destruction of public entities and strategic capacity to deliver services to our poor people. Adjang Voorsitter, laat my toe om ook net by te voeg dat dit is belangrik dat ons gefokus moet wees op die huidige klimaatsverandering krisisse wat ons in die hele land het. En daarvoor het ons nodig dat ons almal moet saamspan om seker te maak dat ons die nodige doen en seker maak dat ons handel met die klimaatsveranderinge wat huidiglik aan die gang is. In order to contribute to tackling climate change, the country has a dual responsibility to honor its international emission reduction commitments, and therefore note that South Africa's carbon tax came into effect on the 1st of June 2019. The EFF is the only party through its manifesto, 2019 manifesto, that sets out a 10% target for greenhouse gas emissions reduction above the current national trajectory. Climate change posed a significant threat to South Africa's water resources, food security, health, infrastructure, and biodiversity. In a country where many people are poor and where levels of inequality are high, these effects of climate change are critical challenges to the development. The EFF, through strengthening legislation, ensure mining companies that have abandoned mines are forced to come back and rehabilitate the nude mining landscapes. For the past years, mining-affected communities have had their land and environment polluted and degraded, leaving them with very few land-to-use options once the mining company cease and operate or scale down. It means that communities have been impacted negatively by those companies. The EFF manifesto outlines how we will force the mining sector to go green through rehabilitating old mines. All mining companies will pay for the rehabilitation of mines which they have abandoned and for draining of acid water. South Africa is at the greatest risk of low levels of development and climate change efforts that aren't on the scale of development countries. Global agreements, however, will not be enough. It must be followed by strong actions on national, provincial, and local levels. Managing the impact of climate change effectively requires a response that builds and sustains the country's social, economic, and environmental resilience. Wetenskaplikes bestempel Afrika as een van die kwesbaarste vastelande vir klimaatsverandering. Die onlangse droogtes en hoë temperature is 'n aanduiding dat Afrika-lande saam moet werk om te verhoed dat gemiddelde temperature nie meer as 1,5 grade Celsius styg nie. Uiteraard is daar rede om bekommerd te wees oor die grootskaalse besoedeling van lug, grond en water en die mense invloed op klimaat. Dit is die armes wat die swaarste kry omdat hulle van hul rykdom onneem is en nou in plakkerskampe moet probeer oorleef. Hulle is mense wat die juk dra van die klimaat en die breë ekologiese krisisse. We must stand very firm in our opposition to the global power bullying. We must make it clear the statement that the United States of America can't continue working against everyone else, in doing so compromising the efforts of everyone to deal with climate change. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Order members, I didn't know Honorable Matebula understands Afrikaans. Next it will be Honorable Baga.
Thank you, Deputy Chairperson, Chairperson of the NCOP, honorable members, and Minister, good afternoon. Deputy Chair, I think it's important to start by saying that we cannot change the course of climate change, but we can lessen and mitigate the impact thereof. The 8th Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, once said, "Saving our planet, lifting people out of poverty, advancing economic growth, these are one and the same fight." We must connect the dots between climate change, water scarcity, energy shortages, global health, food security, and women's empowerment. The rise of temperatures has nearly doubled in the last 50 years. Extreme rainfall events have increased in frequency in arbitrary locations. In a country with high inequality, climate change poses profound challenges to development. It poses a threat to our water resources, food security, health, infrastructure, and ecosystem services. South African researchers and academics put it emphatically that climate change is no longer purely an environmental problem, but a developmental problem. Rising temperatures will shorten winter seasons, which benefit potential disease-carrying agents, enabling them to spread even further. Abundance of water through floods brings more water quantitatively, but quality of such water poses risks for human consumption. This also affects the poorest of the poor, because people in less affluent areas are displaced and some lose their lives in the process. Climate change is a threat multiplier that intensifies the existing political, social, economic, and environmental problems in communities that are facing more of those. We are a country with huge research capacity in our universities, scientists, and various agents who can advise government on what needs to be done. Researchers identified key vulnerable areas to focus on. One, it's water, agriculture, health, to mention but a few. In agriculture, staple crops such as maize is affected because of the need for irrigation. This is as a result of drier conditions from less rain than normal. How does the government miss out on this reality when this information is at its disposal? Food security is at the core of the negative impact of climate change. The government must ensure that farmers, small and big, must be cushioned against this reality. As climate change intensifies, water becomes a very scarce commodity that must be used sparingly. South Africa has efficient weather services institutions that can provide diligent advice. There is a need to embark on a more desalination projects so we can benefit from our ocean water. Let advocacy campaigns on sound water usage be a continuous subject as opposed to reacting when our backs are against the wall. The government should be proactive and not react after the effect all the time. High temperatures due to climate change do affect workers in farms with ailments like heat stress. Heavy rainfall and drought do affect people's health as well. Food insecurity, hunger, and malnutrition are also prevalent as a result of climate change. Some farmers can't take the distress of losing their livestock and crops as a result of either drought or floods. Stress or depression often consumes them and they end up taking their own lives. It is therefore imperative that disaster management and relief is readily on standby to assist without a loss of valuable time. Peter Johnston from the University of Cape Town states that any mitigation on the farming sector requires concerted effort from government, agribusiness, and financial institutions. Tanaka Monungo of UCT concedes that the inability of government to respond effectively to climate change challenges leads to a reduction in how people view government legitimacy, fragmenting the social contract. It is necessary, therefore, for the linkage between climate change, instability, and tension to be much better understood in order to ensure more sustainable approaches to consolidating peace reconciliation in South Africa and ultimately ensure a sustainable environment for future generations. I thank you, Deputy Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Baha. Honorable Mate.
Deputy Chairperson and the Chairperson, the Minister, and all members of the NCOP, allow me to extend my sincere greetings to all of you on this important sitting as we discuss a subject so dear to all of us and so critical in human life, more than any time ever before. We today gather here, Honorable Chairperson, to within the avail of our mental faculties, to jointly explore various ways to combat climate change and protect humankind from the long-term possible effect of extinction, a reality posed by this threat of climate challenge. Honorable Chairperson, in his State of the Nation address, President Ramaphosa said in acknowledging the challenges of climate change, I quote, "This is the time when humankind faces its greatest existential threat in the form of climate change," close quote. This acknowledgement by our Honorable President and the many made by various leaders in many other forums is an important reminder that we, as today's leaders, have a duty to do everything possible within and even beyond our means to combat this challenge of climate change, to save humanity from possible extinction. As we meet here today, majority of our people from the length and breadth of our beautiful country look upon us to provide the necessary solution and interventions. Honorable Deputy Chairperson, these are our people who on a daily basis are confronted with the challenges imposed on them by climate change. These are farmers who are experiencing diminishing rainfall in the far rural province of Limpopo. These are farmers who are sadly losing their crops in Mpumalanga province because of rising temperatures. Honorable Chairperson, these are the farmers who are losing their livestock in the Northern Cape, in the Northwest province, and the rest of our country due to drought, which is a direct consequence of this climate change. Honorable Chairperson, our people who are in the tourist sector are looking upon us to find the permanent solution to this challenge. They do so because day in, day out, they see their sector being on a possible route to extinction. This they do as they witness the wildlife dying helplessly in their eyes due to drought. They see the tourist attracting flora being ravaged by the diminished rainfall. They see their river streams that attracted so many visitors to their shores slowly narrowing and shallowing. Here in the Western Cape, in the Eastern Cape, and in the beautiful KwaZulu-Natal, they witness the tourist attracting marine life being threatened by the rising sea temperatures. Honorable Chairperson, our people in the health fraternity knows that unless we combat climate change, their battle of defeating malaria and other related tropical diseases will remain in vain. They know, Honorable Chairperson, that the future of the health system depends greatly on how much effort we put in combating climate change. Honorable Chairperson, climate change is a reality in our eyes. It is a reality that threatens everything about and around us. There is no phenomenon that has ever tampered with ecosystem in the memorable history of humanity than climate change. This imposes on us a responsibility indeed, Honorable Chairperson, to summon all our abilities to this fight. Much has been said on this matter, much analysis and lot of work produced on this subject, but much still needs to be done. We need to move beyond our wits, we need to walk our talk, and so must all global leaders. Honorable Chairperson, in an address to the 2019 United Nations Climate Action Summit, which was held in New York, Greta Thunberg, a young Swedish climate change activist, cried out that this is all wrong. I should not be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare! You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. And yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are at the beginning of a mass extinction. And all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? You are failing us. But the young people are starting to understand your betrayal. The eyes of all future generations are upon you, and if you choose to fail us, we will never forgive you. Honorable Chairperson, these echoing words of Greta are as much the words of Ayata Melitafa, and are indeed the words of the many other young people beyond the borders of our country, who looks upon us to provide direction. They are the words of the many generations who looks at us with the fear of betrayal. We today must say, we refuse to betray you. We must say, we like to take the lead in the cause of fighting against climate change. This we must do, for it is a noble cause of humanity. It is my view, Honorable Chair, that amongst other things we must do in order to combat climate change and preserve humanity and the entirety of the gift of the ecosystems bestowed upon us by the Most High. It's one, we must provide the necessary support to the Presidential Commission on Climate Change and call on the Commission to speed up its work to assist us fight this phenomenon. We must do everything in our oversight work to ensure that all laws meant to combat climate change are adhered to the latter, and this will go a long way in bringing us closer to climate justice. We must call upon all industries to lend a hand in combating climate change. We must intensify climate change education amongst our people, particularly our learners in school. We must take a lead as a country in advocacy role for climate change all over the world. Over and above all, Honorable Chairperson, I call on all of us to be the advocate of war on combating climate change. We must take the lead to fight climate change in our communities and every corner of our planet. We must refuse to be the betrayers of our youth, as said by Greta. We must say to Greta, to Ayata, and to the children of South Africa, Africa, and the world, that we dare not betray you. This is a noble cause we will never dishonor. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Klute.
Dankie voorsitter. Thank you minister for being here. Die probleem met hierdie debat is dat dit so verpolitiseerd geraak het dat dit baie moeilik is om by ware oplossings vir 'n baie komplekse probleem te kry. Kom ek gee 'n voorbeeld. Gaan sê vir iemand in die rooivleisbedryf eet minder rooivleis. Dis nie so eenvoudig nie. Hoeveel werk sal ons verloor as Suid-Afrika besluit ons gaan 25% minder rooivleis eet? Die feit is Suid-Afrika is ondertekenaar van die Parys-ooreenkoms en ons moet sien watter wetgewing daarop hierdie huis wag om seker te maak dat ons aan daardie ooreenkoms voldoen. Wat ons wel het is die koolstofbelasting wat verhoog is, maar ons weet nie regtig waarheen die verhooging gaan nie. Gaan lê dit net in die staatskoffers om later net 'n reddingsboei te word?
Sorry, Honorable Klute. What's the point of order, Honorable Tebule?
Chair, I cannot translation.
She understood Mr. Arnold's earlier quite well.
Can you fix the translation? Can you continue, Honorable Klute?
Of wat gebeur met daardie koolstofbelasting? Word dit werklik gebruik vir klimaatsverandering se effek en om verligting te bring? But it appears as if government is not quite sure how to attend to our contribution towards a cleaner environment. Say 1, 2, there you go. Chair, this debate is too serious and too important to be politicized by any political ideology. We cannot just be woke about climate change while we turn a blind eye for what's going on in our municipalities. And to the Honourable Speaker of the Eastern Cape, it's not just big corporations that contribute to climate change. Have a close look at what's going on in our municipalities. As ons saamstem dat klimaatsverandering 'n realiteit is, moet ons saamstem dat ons waterbronne ons eerste onmiddellike probleem gaan wees. En ek stem saam met die agbare Labeskagh hieroor. En ons hoor gereeld hoe die minister van water en sanitasie ons herinner dat water 'n skaarste of Suid-Afrika 'n waterskaars land is. Die vraag is, weet ons munisipaliteite dit? Weet munisipaliteite dat water al meer belangrik gaan wees om klimaatsverandering te bekamp? Weet munisipaliteite dat om water te vermors op die lang duur gaan beteken dat ons inwoners se toegang tot water beperk gaan word? Weet ons munisipaliteite dat om nie rampbestuurplanne te hê nie, wat talle nie het nie, sal beteken dat rampe soos droogtes en vloede ons mense weerloos gaan maak daarteen. En ek is bly die agbare voorsitter van die Kogta-komitee van die Vrystaat is vandag hier. Want ek hoop hy gaan môre onmiddellik na sy komitee toe gaan en die volgende vir sy komiteelede vra. Weet die Nkitowana munisipaliteit byvoorbeeld dat om nie aandag te gee aan die riool nie, dit beteken dat die riool deur 'n plaas vloei en uiteindelik in die Vaalrivier beland. Weet Matjabeng munisipaliteit en Welkom byvoorbeeld dat om nie waterlekkasies reg te maak nie, dat Welkom se water vermors word en inwoners raadop is vir die waterlekke in die munisipaliteit. Weet Mangaung munisipaliteit wat soveel as 'n klein swembad vol water elke minuut verloor, dat Suid-Afrika 'n waterskaarste land is. Weet Mafube munisipaliteit dat die riool wat sy stikkende pype vloei ook in die Vaalrivier beland. Voorsitter, Ek hoop agbare spit neem kennis hiervan, want die Valrivier word op hierdie stadium gerehabiliteer, maar Rou riool hou aan vloei in die rivier daaruit vanuit 'n Vrystaatse munisipaliteit. Ek dink nie ons plaaslike regering weet regtig wat die effek van hulle wanbestuur op die klimaat het nie. En dis jammer dat Salga nie ook hier is vandag om deel te neem nie. Hierdie is 'n belangrike debat ook vir hulle, want hulle moet kan antwoord gee oor hoe hulle gaan verseker dat ons munisipaliteite reg is teen klimaatsverandering. Chairperson, we need to start focusing on the things we can change now and have the wisdom and vision to protect our immediate environment through legislation that already exists. So my question to this House and our members is, when you do oversight and you become aware of a municipality where sewage flows into rivers, which is becoming an all-familiar scene in South Africa, what do you do? Will you hold that municipal manager accountable? Will you do anything possible in your constitutional mandate to ensure that water and environmental resources are protected? Members, will you act, even if it means you have to lay a charge at the police against a municipal manager that does nothing to stop sewage spills in rivers and water losses owing to broken pipes? And I'm glad to hear we spoke about doing oversight. Because if you don't do that, then you're only virtue signaling. And if you refuse to do that, I wish to say to you, as Greta Thunberg would say, how dare you not do anything? Just to the EFF, I would like to ask, considering that you are so woke about your carbon footprint, I guess we will be seeing that you give back your flying allowances so we can give that money to the poor. Thank you.
Western Cape Chairperson of Finance, Economic Opportunities and Tourism, Honorable Batman.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. This time last year I was a staff member in this Parliament and now I'm standing here next to you. So thank you for welcoming us and for inviting us to this debate today. Fellow South Africans, it's a bit metaphorical that the lights went off a few minutes ago. And unfortunately, unlike Parliament that has generators, not every household can afford energy security. Chairperson, climate change is the single biggest threat to our global economy, and the latest 2018 IPCC report indicated that the global human net caused emissions of carbon dioxide, or as most people know it, CO2, need to fall by approximately 45% from the 2010 levels to 2030, reaching net zero around 2050. As part of this, Chairperson, renewables will need to supply 70 to 85% of electricity by 2050 to avoid the worst impact of climate change. Honourable Chairperson, I would like to suggest that if the EFF does have a plan in terms of creating 1 million jobs in the energy sectors, that they should bring the plan to the NCOP so that provinces can interrogate such a plan. Honourable Chairperson, the Western Cape recently released the feasibility study for the Western Cape's integrated liquefied natural gas importation and gas-to-power project, which should be applauded. The study shows that the Saldanha Bay port is the most suitable port currently for the importation of LNG, given that it was originally built to accommodate gas, and thus would be less expensive to convert the Eskom Ankerlig power station compared to other coal-fired stations. It is thus imperative for Transnet to move forward with the upgrading of the Saldanha Bay port, as well as the Eskom board approving the full conversion of the Ankerlig power station, which would generate an extra 700 megawatts. Alone, the Ankerlig power station could save a total of $16.4 billion over the 2024 to 2050 forecast period. And in the Western Cape, that would amount to 13% or 13,000 permanent jobs. Further, by converting Ankerlig to LNG, it would reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 907,000 tons per year and save 482 million gallons of water per annum in the Western Cape through the forecast period. The average carbon emissions for coal is about 90 kilos per gigajoules, and for LNG, it emits about 50 kilos for kilojoules. To put this into context, Chairperson, if you burn 1 million wooden matches completely at one time, it will release 1 gigajoule of energy. And by converting the facility, Ankelig would not only improve its fuel efficiency, because as most people know that LNG burns less in terms of heat than normal coal and diesel, it would also reduce the carbon dioxide emissions. Currently, the coal at Ankelig produces about 180% more CO2 emissions than LNG, and the diesel produces 138% more CO2 emissions than natural gas. This means in the context of the Ankelig power station alone, it will reduce the power station's carbon emissions by approximately 50%. And the average avoided social cost, according to the World Bank figures, would mean that the social costs would be avoided from 2040 to 2050 between $205 million and $438 million. Thus, environmental concerns within the South African Energy Plan are key to achieve our goals in reducing our carbon emissions. The Western Cape government, in its constitutional responsibility around policy development, has approved our Western Cape Climate Change Response Strategy and Implementation Framework in 2014, which was preceded by a previous report in 2005. And we are currently under reviewing our...
On a point of order. What's the point of order?
Yeah. No, can the member on the podium
Can you take the seat?
Yes. When she speaks, can she please address the House, not the chairperson? Thank you.
That is not a point of order. We are out of order. Can you continue, Honorable Batman?
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, through you to the members. The Western Cape Provincial Constitutional Mandate has its limits in terms of decision-making and its implementation ability. For example, with regards to the energy mix as well as the management of water resources. Through the Western Cape government's energy security game changer, the Western Cape aims to reduce its electricity demand from Eskom by 10% over the next 3 years, with the installation of rooftop PV, increased installation in solar water heaters, the reduction of energy use in public and private buildings, and the promotion of industrialization by importing liquid natural gas. We also have our regional commitments, partnering with the Free State of Bavaria on transitioning to climate refrigeration-friendly gases. Further, we are now supporting municipalities in order to allow small-scale embedded generation, with the majority of our municipalities already allowing this and having NERSA-approved feed-in tariffs. Households should be allowed to generate their own and sell their own energy. And House and Chairperson, to put our money where our mouth is, the Western Cape has now allocated a budget of 60 million rand over the MTEF period to the Green Economy team in order to support municipalities who wishes to procure energy from independent power producers. Chair, Eskom wants IPPs because allowing IPPs on the grid will give Eskom the time and the space to do maintenance. And unlike the Kuburg nuclear station, the maintenance for Eskom is not legislated. So if the member from the EFF wishes to bring something to the House, perhaps we should start legislating maintenance from Eskom. Chairperson and the House. The Western Cape has a population of 7 million people, 51% which are female, 2 million households in total, third of them being female-led. Research literature now confirms that women carry a disproportionate amount of impact from the consequences of poor quality living environments as well as natural disasters. Further, there's an environmental risk likely to impact upon the quality of life, energy, food security of these households, with the most of the burden falling upon women and girls. This is why the Western Cape Department of Environmental Affairs has a permanent gender mainstreaming forum as part of its annual programs. Load shedding means women are disproportionately affected by the lack of access to adequate and affordable and safe energy options. Women suffer the brunt of load shedding as a result of the implementation of South Africa's energy plan over the years. A particular study in Gweru, Zimbabwe, where a study of families, households, and electricity showed that women indicated that they had to go sleep earlier without cooking or prepare meals when there's electricity, go for uncalled fasting, while the men were more likely to go out to pubs, clubs, visit friends. One woman commented that when her children went to bed without eating, that she was seen as, quote, not being a caring mother. In this study, it was clear that load shedding encouraged men to engage more in the public space, where women had to be confined to the house to deal with load shedding. The study further showed how women was the energy decision makers, and then when load shedding occurred, all of a sudden they were more under scrutiny by the men for how they are spending the budget. Chairperson and the House, load shedding now disproportionately discriminates and disempowered already vulnerable women. Load shedding is sexist. And by not advocating for a more progressive energy mix in South Africa, by not fast-tracking the decommissioning of coal, by not fast-tracking bringing IPPs and cleaner and alternative energies on the grid, we are failing the women of South Africa. The National Minister of Environmental Affairs needs to please urgently consult the National Minister of Energy regarding the impact of the Integrated Resource Plan, as well as the impact of not moving with speed to cleaner and/or renewable energy sources in our country in line with our international obligations, as well as the impact of not reducing our carbon emissions. Chairperson, we have a constitutional right to an environment that is not harmful to our health and our well-being. And Minister Creasy, through the Chair and the House, you have immense power to influence our national energy plan, energy mix, and as a result, be able to advocate for decisions in order for us to reduce our carbon emissions in line with our international obligations. I'm thus here today to request, Minister, help us help you. Chairperson, it is time to take back our power. I thank you.
Thank you. The Mpumalanga Chief Whip, Honorable Mlombo.
I'm smiling. I'm smiling. Honorable House Chairperson, the Chairperson of the NCOP, the Deputy Chairperson, Honorable Minister Creasy, my colleagues from different provinces, ladies and gentlemen, this debate comes at an appropriate and most extremely difficult time in the history of our country and the world. The economies of the world are going through very difficult and challenging times, and our country, South Africa, it's not spared from these difficult economic developments. Some of the contributory factors to these challenging times are the collapse and crumbling of some economies, the political developments in those countries, the threatening diseases, and the negative impact of climate change. The sectors of our economy that are vulnerable to climate change are facing collapse, and the poor and the working class suffer the inevitable consequences of job losses, of poverty and malnutrition. Yet, despite these difficult conditions, we are, Chairperson, determined. We are not prepared to succumb and shy away from the task of seeking to change those very difficult conditions in favor of the majority of our people who are mostly the working class, and the poor. A better life for our people, to us, it's a non-negotiable objective, and we shall strive to achieve it despite the unfavorable conditions that are engulfing our country and the world. One of the greatest philosophers in the history of humankind, Karl Marx, once said, I quote, "Men make history, but under conditions and circumstances not of their own choosing," close quote. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Chair, in 2014, South Africa crafted a bold, a very ambitious and visionary economic plan. This economic plan is Vision 2030, as espoused in the National Development Plan. The National Development Plan envisages a South Africa that strives to reduce unemployment. It envisages a South Africa that is capable to respond to diseases. It envisages a South Africa that drastically reduces the levels of poverty, and a South Africa that can stimulate and grow its economy. In its preamble, the National Development Plan envisages a South Africa that is able to respond to the negative impact of climate change. It says, if I may just borrow a leaf from the National Development Plan, it says, I quote, "We acknowledge that each and every one of us is intimately and inextricably of this earth, with its beauty and life-giving sources, that our lives on earth are both enriched and complicated by what we have contributed to its condition. South Africa, our country, it's our land, it's our home. We sweep and keep clean our yards, we travel through it, we enjoy its varied climate, its landscape, and its vegetation. It is as diverse as we are, the people of South Africa. We live and work in it, on it we care. Preserving it for future generations, we discover it all the time as it gives life to us. We honor the life in it. From time to time, it reminds us of the infinite power when rains and floods overflow, when winds buffet, when seas range, and the sun beams unrelentingly in drought. In humility, we learn our limitations. To create living spaces within this beautiful land is to commiserate with our desired values, close quote. Honorable Chair, the above vision statement of the National Development Plan clearly sums up the beauty and richness of our country, South Africa, and in particular, my province, the Mpumalanga province. We have inherited a South Africa and a province that is endowed with mineral and agricultural produce. A South Africa and a province that is endowed with rich mineral and capable of sustaining itself and able to feed its people. We believe as a province and as a country that we have a joint responsibility to protect our gold. We have a joint responsibility to protect our platinum, to protect our coal, to protect our zinc, and to protect our iron. We have a joint responsibility to protect our rich agriculture in order to ensure
that we continue to create jobs for our people. We have a responsibility to protect our national parks and our tourism sector, which makes Mpumalanga to be amongst the tourist attraction provinces. We have a responsibility to ensure that our power stations are friendly to the environment. We believe, Honorable Chair, that we should strive to work together to respond to the agency to combat climate change, because South Africa and our province in Mpumalanga's economy is highly dependent on the income generated from the production, from the processing, from the export, and from the consumption of these mineral resources. We understand and are alive to the reality that climate change is a threat to sustainable development. Climate change has a negative impact to poverty alleviation. It has a negative impact to food security. It has a negative impact to water supply. It has a negative impact to energy supply. It has a negative impact to environmental health. It has a negative impact to plant and animal diversity. Climate change has the capacity to destroy tourism due to the loss of habitats and biodiversity. It has the capacity to lead to the loss of the forest that produces timber for the commercial production. It has the capacity to change the human health. Honorable Chair, in order to combat the reality of climate change, we must commit to do the following. We need to commit to be the ambassadors and pioneers to combat climate change. We need to develop and implement an integrated response to climate change. We need to accept that climate change is a cross-cutting issue that demands the integration across departments, across sectors, amongst stakeholders, and across countries. To develop, we need to develop a strategy which will be consistent with the national priorities that are set out in the different strategies that have been put in place to deal with the issue of climate change. We need to draw on the energies of our people, irrespective of their ideologies. We need to work towards the growing and inclusive economy, an economy that takes care of its people. As I conclude, Honorable Chair, it is only and only if we work together to achieve the above objectives that we will be able jointly to respond to the agency to combat the reality of climate change. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Nzupe. Sorry, Honorable Nzupe, before you can start, let me take Honorable Mikalakis. Mikalakis.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. I just want to check, are all the other political parties also going to get an extra 1.5 minutes?
You are not going to assist me. Rest assured, I'm going to deal with them the same way. Honorable Nzupe.
Thanks, thanks, the House Chair, honorable members, ministers, Chief Whip. Just for the record, we would like to deal with the misguided misconception of the opposition, particularly the DA, by rejecting the amendment of the Section 25 to redistribute the land to our people as irrational.
Chairperson, point of order.
Let me take the point of order, Honorable Klute.
Just point of order being, I'm just trying to find out what the relevance is to the debate.
Honorable Klute, that order, members, Honorable Klute, that is not a point of order. Honorable Nsupe has his own time. It's entirely up to him how he wants to contribute in the debate. Can you continue, Honorable Nsupe?
Thanks, House Chair. Grandstanding will never delay the African National Congress from giving the land to our people. Honorable House Chair, South Africa is a youthful population. About 20% of the population is aged between the 10 years and 19 years of old. As of 2019, with the growing population now seated around 58 million, youth population between the age of 18 and 40 years old is estimated around 17 million. In 2019, a team of researchers from the VEDS Reproductive Health and HIV Institute and the South African Medical Research Council published a report that indicated how young people in South Africa will inherit a world left hazardous by greenhouse gas emissions. The same report indicated that those responsible for the climate change will be spared the full brunt of their effects. Is it what is meant by, okay, my apologies. Yes. Is it what is meant that by when the kids will be punished by the sins of their parents? One of the ways in which we can help deal with climate change is through legislative mechanism put in place. It is the responsibility of the state to ensure that the systems are put in place to ensure that everyone has access to safe and healthy living and working conditions. With punitive legislation in place, the state should ensure that those who have harmed the environment and have harmed the health of our people are held accountable for this. It is a practice in other several countries for young people to use litigation to hold their governments and private sector to account. South Africa has one best commendable pieces of legislation around climate change in the world. Our national environmental management amendment laws are well designed to help advance responsible role as a nation in issues of environmental protection. NEMA is meant to establish and review the land use guidelines, examine the land patterns to determine the impact of the inequality and quantity of the natural resources, and carry out the service which will assist proper management and conservation of the environment. South Africa's disaster risk reduction management legislation serves as a model for other countries and considered to be one of the advanced institutional frameworks for disaster management in the world. There can never be doubt that in terms of the legislative readiness, South Africa is not wanting, Honorable House Chair. Climate change is the responsibility of the entire globe, and each and every country is expected to contribute in reducing the effects of climate change in our society. This requires a collective effort of each and every citizen in each and every country. We need a global social compact in dealing with climate change on a global scale. The United Nations defines early warning system as an imperative measure for climate change, using integrated communication systems to help communities to prepare for hazardous climate-related events. It further said that successful early warning system will help to save lives and jobs, land infrastructure, support long-term sustainability. Honorable House Chair, we are not founding as South Africa in terms of our level of preparedness in relation to climate change. We have a clear and well-crafted national legislation to help with negative impact of climate change. South Africa Weather Services is mandated by the Weather Services Act of 2001 to produce weather and climate change information, as well as providing early warnings alerts. The South African Weather Services is the main source of information and collaborates through social compact with other private institution, community research organization, and provides severe warning and advisories to National Disaster Management Center. These weather advisories are important in ensuring that our state is readiness of emergency. It has been reported that South Africa is amongst 12 largest carbon dioxide emitting countries in the world. Our economy is reliant on coal resources to generate power and liquid fuels, and this places us among the highest per capita emissions in the developing world. The United Nations Framework Convention, Climate Change, Paris Accord, place the responsibility on South Africa as a signatory member to take active steps in dealing with climate change. As a nation, we must effectively deal with air pollution. It is reported by researchers at the International Growth Center that the developing countries like South Africa have a heavy reliance on fossil fuels, resulting in productivity losses, immortality due to high concentration of the pollution. Droughts are associated with climate change, and this is the effect of human behavior on the planet's temperature. Our provinces like the Free State, Northern Cape, Northwest, and Eastern Cape are some of the provinces hard hit by devastating impact of climate change. Our small and emerging farmers are experiencing challenges, and some of them had to close their farm enterprises because of climate change related to drought. Honorable House Chair, throughout the corners of South Africa, there are increased level of anxiety to climate change. Young people are uncertain about the future impact of climate change and nervous in terms of how the world are going to inherit will look like in 2 decades to come. Like I've earlier indicated, they are interested in the action being taken by the government and would like some reassurance that the world they will inherit will be habitable with less risk of human extinction. Young people are asking if indeed senior citizens are conscious of apocalyptic nature of climate change that they face on a daily basis. The impact of climate change is felt by young people in a classroom where they cannot even concentrate because of high temperature, risk of heart. The floods that destroy the bridges that they pass when they're way to go to the educational institution. In conclusion, House Chair, we have seen in South Africa and around the globe young people taking to the stage and becoming climate change activists. They are in numbers appealing to the government of the world to save the environment and reduce carbon emission with devastating impact of the environment. They are eager waiting to hear reassurance voices that are needed, that are indeed senior citizens of the world, care about them and will strive hard to live a world with a clean environment and sufficient natural resources for their continued livelihood. As a voice of millions of young people in this country, I would like, on behalf of the youth, welcome the finalization of the climate change bill, which will provide a regulatory framework for the effective management of the inevitable change impacts by enhancing adaptive capacity, strengthening of resilience. The introduction of green economy initiative is most welcome, and young people stand ready to become agents of green economy. We are encouraged by the establishment of the Presidential Commission on Climate Change, move towards a low carbon growth trajectory, green economy in our lifetime. Just for the record, House Chair, last week there is a learner who passed away in Tloletsang Primary School because he ate a chocolate with a few friends. The ANC would like to pass the word of condolences to the family. ANC le ka hore ho lelapa la bo mogadi ha moya ya robala ka khotso, and the 4 remaining are still in ICU. And again, ho lelapa la bo Maloka wa robala ka khotso, and the rest of his must follow activists like Mcebo Dlamini. The youth of this country is with you. Thank you very much, House Chair.
Thank you. Lilunga lelihloniphekile lalendlu wemkhandlu wetifundza umhlonishwa Mfaela.
Honorable Chairperson, at the COP21 in Paris on 12 December 2015, parties to the UNFCCC reached a historic agreement to combat climate change and to accelerate and intensify the action and investment needed for sustainable low carbon future. All nation-state parties present undertook two actions to reduce carbon emissions in the form of intended national determined contribution, which will form the foundation for climate action post-2020. As we all know, the INDCs form the foundational contribution which each country will be required to make in order to keep expected global average temperature rise to within degree of 2 Celsius. The question in 2020, which we must ask ourselves is the South Africa doing enough? Are we bringing our share regarding adaptations and mitigation of climate change? Or are we further contributing to climate change by not having clear enforcement policy and legislation on the issue? And how are we adopting to the multifaceted, complex, and continuous process with the aim of reducing the impact of climate change? There are the hard questions that require answering. Barriers to adaptation must be identified and addressed. Otherwise, it was bulala lento. Honorable Chairperson, the continent of Africa currently finds itself having to meet the enormous demands for energy. And the challenge we face in meeting the demand is that we further add to global warming, so doing. Kunzima. It is therefore most important that carbon emissions remains low, and they can if the right low carbon energy choices are made now. The matter is urgent, Chairperson. We must follow part of sustainable energy efficiency. Solar, wind, and hydro energy must receive greater impetus. Renewable must lead our drive towards greater energy efficiency. In conclusion, Mr. Chairperson, this is our planet. We must walk gently upon her. Relentless chasing of profits and continuous economic development in pursuit of great growth above all will only bring unbalance to nature. Izosibulala lento. I thank you.
Thank you. Siyabonga. Lilunga lelihloniphekile lendlu wemkhandlu wetifundza umhlonishwa Smith.
Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, members of the public and fellow South Africans. Honorable House Chair, I seriously consider changing my surname after today, but let me leave it there. Honorable Smith, I have to respond to your flimsy dog debate. You talk about preserving water and the quality of water, but your ANC-led local governments are the biggest contributors to water pollution through both negligent and deliberate sewer spills into water systems. If I can only mention Mfuleni municipality in Gauteng that caused unimaginable damage to the Fall River system, that the estimated cost for repair will be R1 billion. You talk about fires and the impact of fires, but there is, if we look in the Western Cape and the number of fires and the possible involvement of politicians and political parties in initiating that, you should look in your back door. Honorable Ndongeni, you are... You refer to the ANC's commitment to environmental commitment. But let's just look at the budget allocation to the specific department. Then we see how serious you are actually. So, soos ons sê in Afrikaans, suig aan die agterspeen. Honorable Kyle, it is rich from you to blame new liberal tendencies, while your corrupt, infested ANC should take responsibility for corrupt mining deals at the cost of the environment. You also refer to people losing their homes and belongings due to floods. But in Mogalakwena, your ANC-led government built RDP houses in extension 14, 19, and 20 within the 50-year and 100-year flood lines. Minister Creasy, I want to urge you and your department to urgently please attend to the large-scale soil erosion taking place just outside of Polokwane in Limpopo. It's having a massive impact. If you fly over, you'll actually see it. Honorable Ntube, I am, I'm sometimes wondering what is the contribution of Ace Magashule in you being here. But if you actually attend Parliament more times, you will actually know what is going on and what is the topic of the day. Honorable Arnolds, when I look at your party's action and behavior like burning tires, I sometimes wonder if the EFF don't stand for eliminate your future forever. Honorable Chair, we find ourselves in a time of extremes, a time of frequent and fast-moving change. And we as a country need to keep...
Sorry, Honorable Smith. Honorable members, heckling is allowed, but you do it in a way without drowning the speaker at the podium. You can do it, but don't drown him. We must still listen to him. You can continue, Honorable Smith.
And as a country, we need to keep up to the new trends and new set of values. One of these changes is climate change and the new ethical responsibility we have towards the future of our planet. If we look at the locust outbreak in Central and North Africa, I ask myself, are we as South Africa ready to protect our farmers against natural disasters and plagues like this? I'm afraid to say I really don't think so. Yet we have a responsibility to do everything we can to help prevent things to get worse and slow down climate change. But on the other hand, we must prepare for the unavoidable as well. We must become forward-thinking and proactive as government, and the Western Cape is a good example of exactly that. This government must incentivize farmers to make use of more water-wise farming methods and other farming measures that can control the environment, like warehouse farming. This is crucial for food security and stability in the industry in the future. Government must invest heavily in research with regards to more resilient specimens that can withstand the extremes that might follow. Therefore, honest support needs to be funded urgently to be able to fulfill their mandate successfully. Honourable Chairperson, our current electricity crisis, of which we felt just last night and earlier today, with another stage 4 load shedding migraine provide a window of opportunity for us to transform our energy sector. But the political will need to be there to do that and to do it now. We need to open window 5 immediately for IPPs to come on board and invest in a renewable energy generation capacity. We must move away from coal-based energy consumption. There is no such thing as clean coal energy. This fact comes straight out of the mouth of Minister Creasy, who said there is no technology to clean carbon emissions from coal generation.
As you conclude,
let
Honorable
us
Smith.
think of our future and the future of our beautiful planet and the future of our children and their children, and to act now, or we will be judged by the future generations of for our failure to listen to our planet's cries. I thank you.
Thank you. The Minister of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, Honorable Chris.
Honourable House Chairperson, honourable members, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this debate, and allow me at the outset to once again welcome President Cyril Ramaphosa's commitment, which he made in his State of the Nation address, to establishing the Presidential Climate Change Commission to lead our just transition to a lower carbon, climate resilient and sustainable economy and society that will leave no one behind. Let me further also restate what all honourable members across party lines have stated today, that science is telling us that the southern part of Africa has been identified as a climate change hotspot with extreme weather events. Evidence we have all seen in recent times, and this includes flooding and severe storms in KwaZulu-Natal, as well as parts of the Eastern Cape, leading to loss of lives, destruction of infrastructure and homes. The Eastern, Western and Northern Cape have experienced the most prolonged drought in recorded history. These extreme weather events put pressure on our already constrained fiscus, health sector, disaster management and social security systems. Our national biodiversity assessments, as many members have said, confirm the impacts of climate change on biodiversity and now spans all realms and most species, including impacting on ecosystem structure and function, as well as a direct threat to the survival of many species. It is important to acknowledge that climate change poses both risks and opportunities for our country, and I will speak a little bit more about these opportunities later in my speech. On the risk side, we know that climate change has the potential to reverse the progress made under the Millennium Development Goals and further impede our efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals we have adopted together with the international community. Our vulnerability to climate change is exacerbated by our economic inequality, poverty, and our current dependence on coal-fired power generation. This year, the Paris Agreement under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change comes fully into force. Climate change and its associated consequences can only be addressed by the world's nations working together. It can only be addressed when together we all honor our mutual commitments and our differentiated responsibilities. It can only be effective when we stand together in support of the Paris Agreement and the Kyoto Protocol. South Africa will continue as a responsible global citizen to speak in support of multilateralism and the Convention and its Paris Agreement. Honourable members, when I spoke in the State of the Nation debate, I outlined in some detail how national government is responding to climate change and how we are fulfilling our obligations under the UNFCCC, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Accord, to which we are a signatory. Today, it is appropriate to focus on what sub-national government can do. At COP25 in Madrid last December, the United Cities and Local Governments, or UCLG, had the following to say: in the face of multiple complex and interconnected challenges at the global level, it is essential to work together among different spheres of government in order to achieve common objectives considering all stakeholders. Increasingly, local and regional action is accelerating commitments to implement Agenda 2030 and the Paris Agreement, so that the future of the climate considers the principles of solidarity, social justice, intergenerational dialogue and peace, and with a human rights approach. This significant statement acknowledges the role that all levels of government must play in achieving Agenda 2030 and the Paris Agreement. It also stresses that such agreements cannot be achieved without involving local communities and a wide range of civil society actors. Our own climate change policy outlines that our overall strategic approach for South Africa's climate change response is needs-driven and customized, developmental, transformational, empowering and participatory, dynamic and evidence-based, balanced and cost-effective, and integrated and aligned. So, honourable members, you know we are currently finalising the climate change bill that will give effect to management approaches to the inevitable impacts and mitigation for climate change measures. In this regard, all provinces and municipalities have to undertake climate risk assessments and develop their own customized climate change response strategies that take local circumstances into account. To this end, at a technical level, we've already worked with many of your provincial governments to develop provincial adaptation plans, and we have supported all district municipalities in developing climate change response plans. Now, honourable members, as members of this NCOP, we are asking you to ensure that all provincial executive councils and all municipal councils officially adopt the strategies to ensure political leadership in addressing climate change. For provinces and municipalities to prioritize implementation will require resource allocation and building necessary local capacity. In this regard, we welcome the fact that in many districts, climate change strategies are already integrated into the integrated development plans. A number of cities in our country are also members of global city movements relating to climate action and city networks that contribute to climate change agendas, such as the 100 Resilient Cities, the ICLEI Local Governments for Sustainability, and the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group. Many have internal, through their statutory planning documents, and global carbon commitments and targets that apply to functions such as transport planning, urban development and spatial planning, infrastructure investment, and service delivery. Furthermore, there is increasing regional coordination and horizontal integration of climate change responses as municipalities are sharing practice and learning from one another, such as the KwaZulu-Natal Climate Change Compact. Some of South Africa's metros are pioneering net carbon zero building policies and regulations, and this requires that buildings exceed the country's energy efficiency and energy consumption standards, and that their remaining energy demand is met by renewable energy. We are working with the Weather Service to enhance our early warning systems for extreme weather events, so that provinces and municipalities can ensure readiness to address and avert climate-induced disasters. 3 weeks ago, I met with the South African Weather Service, and we agreed that the service will begin to educate local communities across the country so that they can better understand climate change and respond appropriately. We are also working with a range of non-governmental institutions to create awareness among schools and learners on issues such as climate change and sustainability. We will enhance our existing partnership with the Department of Education to improve the teaching of environmental aspects of the life orientation curriculum. National, provincial, and local government have environmental programs that aim to restore ecosystem services, those services which nature provides free of charge. Through our environmental programs this year, we're spending 1.9 billion rand to restore wetlands, estuaries, coastal dunes, to better protect infrastructure and human settlements from storms, floods, and sea level rise. If we work more closely together, honourable members, and we coordinate our work better, we will have much more significant impact. Our government is currently discussing with the German government a new grant earmarked for land-based programs to enhance the carbon sequestration potential of South Africa's natural biomes. Through this initiative, we plan to enhance carbon absorption in grasslands and savannas through improved grazing management, as well as the restoration of our indigenous forests. And Honourable Smith, you'll be glad to know that Limpopo is included in this program. Honourable members, we often emphasize the risk climate change poses to our country. It's also important to understand that it presents us with opportunities. Responding appropriately to climate change provides provincial and local government with new opportunities for inclusive growth and job creation in the field of renewables and green technology. A recent study by Accenture estimates green industries and technologies can unlock economic activities to the value of $350 billion on our continent. In the wake of the release of the new Integrated Resource Plan and the announcements on different dispensations for energy generation by the Minister of Energy, new possibilities are opening up at sub-national government level for the use of renewables. Standard Bank has just issued a green bond for the first time aimed at raising $200 million in a 10-year facility to support environmentally friendly projects in renewables, energy, water efficiency, and green buildings. Our country has some of the largest scale resources in vanadium, platinum, palladium, nickel, manganese, rare earths, copper, and cobalt. Platinum-catalyzed fuel cells and hydrogen markets are beginning to grow exponentially. South Africa has one of the world's most extensive platinum reserves, and our country is well placed to take advantage of these new economic opportunities. We are currently finalizing the National Employment Vulnerability Assessment and associated job resilience plans for the 4 value chains, namely coal, petroleum, transport, metals, tourism, and agriculture. We will need to work together towards the implementation of plans for sector resilience in all provinces and at all district levels. Since 2018, we have mobilized in excess of 7.5 billion rands worth of grant and concessional finance from both bilateral and multilateral funding sources. These funds are funding climate support programs in government, local adaptation programs, energy efficiency, development of low-emission development strategies, and capacity building, as well as battery storage and renewable. A new DBSA climate finance facility and an ecosystem-based adaptation program in the West Indian Ocean. This includes $3.6 million from the Global Environment Facility for scaling up and mainstreaming sustainable land management for large-scale impact on grazing land. South Africa will continue to lobby developed countries to provide an adequate, reliable, and predictable source of international funding for both mitigation and adaptation. Our country will also participate in a range of international forums to access both grant-based and blended finance solutions for our climate needs. Honourable members, as we have said, climate change poses us with both risks and opportunities. It is important that across government, at all levels of government, provincial, national, and local government, we mobilize and work together. It is important that we involve business, organized labor, and civil society, and of course, the young people whose future is most at stake. If we work together under the auspices of the Presidential Climate Change Commission, I have no doubt that we will be able to ensure our country benefits from the opportunities presented, and that we ensure a just transition to a lower carbon growth path that leaves no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable Matibe.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson. Re watch be the chair chinekedziwo re nekedze zwiṱuku hafha zwino yelana na debate hei ine ya vha hone phanḓa hashu. Kha vho House Chairperson, vho Ministara, miraḓo yoṱhe ya National Council of Provinces, lushaka lwoṱhe ngei nnḓa ngo angaredza. Rine South African National Congress ri khou ḓa u nekedza mafhungo ane ra khou tea u nekedza lushaka zwi tshi yelana na hei topic ine ro I nekedziwa hafha kha National Council of Provinces. House Chairperson, let me start with the ANC policy. In terms of the constitution of the African National Congress, in the aims and objectives of the ANC, Rule 2.8 states that the ANC will support, advance, and the cause of national liberation, development, world peace, disarmament, most importantly, honorable members, support and advance the cause of environmentally sustainable development. So it is within our blood as the African National Congress that we have an environmentally sustainable development. Just for further indulgence on this policy, honorable members, on the policy position of the ANC, in the 1992 Ready to Govern policy guidelines, the ANC put it that any plans to grow the economy must not harm the environment. So even before we were in government, we were ready to put any environmental friendly guidelines that will assist our environment, just on the passing. So it's not about any that we are already in government. Even before we were in government, our policy position was geared towards making a good environment for our people. According to the Global Risk Report for 2020, the top 5 global risks in terms of livelihood and impacts are all environmental. Extreme weather conditions, failure for climate change mitigation and adaptation, human-made environmental damage and disasters, major biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse, major natural resources such as earthquakes and tsunami. Vhathu vho amba murahu hanga hafha vho no sumbedzisa uri president vho zwi amba musi vha tshi ṋekedza State of the Nation address vho Ramaphosa uri vha khou ḓiṋekedzela kha u ita uri South Africa line ḽi a sedzana na mafhungo a tshanduko ya kilima. Nga iṅwe nḓila zwoṱhe zwine ra funa u zwi ita sa muvhuso ri funa u zwi ita ri tshi sedza na hezwo. So all the challenges that are there in terms of the climate change and the bill that has been passed by Parliament, all of them are geared towards making sure that we have a responsive government that responds to climate change. In responding to the agency to combat the reality of climate change, we need to pull all our resources together, and this requires building a very strong social compact for all of us. So it's not about Western Cape, Honorable Lapskang. It's about South Africa, it's about SADC, it's about Africa, it's about the world. So if we don't integrate and have a social compact, all of us, and try to isolate ourselves as a province, it will never assist us in the fight, and it does not show agency towards addressing the issue of climate change. In addition, the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy provides a common vision for climate change adaptation and resilience for the country, outlines the priority for achieving the vision. This roadmap for enhancing resilience to climate change, because it will also ensure facilitation and development of adaptation initiatives at different levels of government, business, society at large, thus informing resource allocation to various stakeholders towards climate change resilience. So we should be able to pull together, have a social compact with our business, all the stakeholders that are there, youth, women, all stakeholders, so that all of us are geared towards having that. We have already elaborated on the President's commitment during the State of the Nation address. The implementation of climate change adaptation and mitigation program must be strengthened within our local municipalities. It's good that the ANC-led government has got a district model, which will assist in terms of cooperation and integration of all the plans that we have as national, provincial, and local government. If we do that, it's going to assist in terms of those plans. So no municipality, no locality can be isolated from other areas in South Africa, because environmental impact does not have borders and boundaries. It is for every part of South Africa. Local government and provincial government must have infrastructure development plans responsive to challenges posed by climate change. As we have noticed, the devastation of floods in Gauteng as well as KZN is an indication that all our provinces and local municipalities must put together their disaster management plan that is responsive to any climate change that is there. The policy think tanks exploring current and future risks from flooding, storm surge, and other disasters in Eden district municipalities have recommended the restoration and protection of key ecosystems such as wetlands, dunes, to proactively manage disaster risk. Those are some of the municipalities that have put in place plans to do that. And for us, honorable members, to respond, urgent need to upscale climate action. We need to take into account the following: barriers and enablers of policy implementation. We need to look at the research and development. We need to look at young people as well as women, and how do we empower them. We need, Honorable Minister, to initiate community projects that speaks to issues of climate change, so that climate change must not remain in Parliament and in government. It must also go to the communities and ensure that communities are there and active participants in terms of climate change. Put alternative livelihoods, nature-based solutions, ecosystem adaptation, climate change flagship, and climate information and services. Our people need to have information on climate change, and they have been doing that. In terms of the legislative framework, as I conclude, House Chairperson, it is important to ensure that effective legislative framework to ensure that South Africa meets all its obligations. We have got obligation in SADC, we have got obligation in the AU, we have got obligation in the United Nations in terms of climate change obligations. So the strict adherence to all those obligations will assist us to do that. As I conclude, House Chairperson, government led by the ANC has initiated various flagship programs for climate change adaptation and mitigation. It is only the government of the ANC that can adequately respond to the urgency to combat the reality of climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Labuschagne.
Honourable House Chair, Minister and members, thank you to my colleagues and all other members taking part in this important debate on climate change today. Thank you, Minister, for your input and drive in the Department of Environmental Affairs, Forestry and Fisheries. We are awaiting the climate change bill as a